Hey, I'm FriendlyBaron, and it's been a while since I've made one of my strat update videos where we look at the old techniques the speedrun uses, then see what the new strat is, for example using the truck to push the NPC here, and then compare the two to see how much time is saved. There are so many new things to cover, more than even shown here, so let's get started. Starting off in the third mission of the game, Repossession, after parking the car at the entrance to the alley, we would be stuck waiting for Lamar to slowly walk down to the next mission trigger point. The only thing known to optimize this was to punch or otherwise interrupt this homeless NPC so that Lamar would not stop to talk to him. Then we would wait in front of the known correct garage for Lamar to arrive to begin the next part of the mission. The new optimized strategy is to push Lamar down the alley. The animation of him stopping to taunt the NPC still plays, but we just push him right past it, much faster than his normal walking speed. First person is used as it allows Franklin to run and lets the player have finer control over the movement of the pushing action than third person would offer. There is still a short wait at the end for Lamar after the final voice lines begin playing about halfway down the alley. This strat saves 8 seconds when done well. Not as drastic as using a truck to push an NPC as shown in the intro, but a very respectable time save given how simple it is to pull off. We'll be looking at moves that are way riskier for way less time save later in the video. After the garage cutscene, the player then has to do a shootout as Franklin, so that they can escape from the alley. Normally at the end, the speedrunner at least knows the motorcycle they are after will show, and they can quickly shoot the rider off instead of having to chase them throughout the city like a casual player would. The new strat here is to run right between the houses, which skips having to jump over the fence, and allows for this extremely smooth pickup of the bike before it even falls over. When executed perfectly, this saves 3.5 seconds, which comes from skipping the bike pickup animation and the fence jumping animation. So even though they get on the bike at the same time, the new speedrun is farther down the road and already moving in the correct direction. The player then has to ride the motorcycle back near Franklin's house in the city. The old route involves cutting through this parking lot, over the freeway, through an alley, and then dangerously popping out onto this road blindly, which was a spot where many runs were reset. Now, the speedrun just jumps over the trolley rails onto the road above, creating a much more direct route back to the car washing ending location for this mission, which is oddly a safer route even though it involves going like 100 feet in the air. This map helps visualizes the two routes. The old route in red, you can see goes a bit north through the parking lot, over the freeway, and then a sharp turn out of those alleys. The new route in blue, by utilizing the jump on the hill, maintains a much straighter path throughout the whole drive. This only ends up saving 2 seconds, but again it's actually a safer option, as the traffic is easier to dodge when traveling on the straight road, instead of all the perpendicular crossings the old route had. As far as how to hit this jump, there are some specific things the speedrunner aims at, most notably hitting this far right edge of the rocky area as can be seen on the right here. The video on the left is a bit too far left in game, and will get so much airtime on the bike that they slow down too much, and they lose those 2 seconds that the route can normally save them. One small change to the mission pulling Favours. We get Tanya into the bullet vehicle we have saved from our previous mission. The old route will be going straight, while the new route takes 2 smoother turns left and right, instead of the sharp tighter left turns the former speedrun uses. This allows the new route to arrive at the lock gate sooner, saving 1.5 seconds. After finishing pulling Favours, the player must drive back to Franklin's house to begin the next mission, Chop. The old method of starting the mission involved carefully but quickly driving the bullet between the fences in order to hit the yellow mission marker, which was not the easiest thing to do because of how wide of a vehicle it is. As players got better at driving, and faster because of brake boosting, it was found that you could slam into the fencing at a rather precise angle in order to get the wheels up over the top, and that was enough to trigger the mission marker. This is not super easy. You had the time using Franklin's power here in order to keep the car planted on the ground. As in addition to providing extra grip, his special ability will also suck the car down into the ground if it's airborne or about to become airborne. Then the hit on the wall to be at the right spot to just get the wheel over a bit, far enough to hit the yellow dot. Side by side, this method of mission entry saved 1.5 seconds. I say saved in the past tense because an even better method was found soon after. If you had enough speed, instead of timing Franklin's power to stop the car from jumping, the speedrunner instead utilizes that airtime on the left side of the road to jump all the way into the mission marker. And luckily, this game will instantly stop your vehicle upon starting most missions. Comparing the two new methods, the full send jump saves another half second on top of the wall hit method. So going back to compare the old careful park between the fences, a full 2 seconds is now saved upon entry to this mission. This next strat also involves starting a mission, this time Complications, which is in the parking lot of Simeon's car dealership. Originally, we'd park next to the opening of the bushes to sneak through close to Simeon, which begins his voice lines to play, and then lead into the mission. Now, the way missions start really only require you to be close enough in a circle around the mission trigger, so visualized, it's kind of like this ring around Simeon, and one of the edges is right in this hedge gap. You don't need to actually be standing or walking or anything else once the character is inside the area, so now we can just jump out of the van at nearly full speed and splat Franklin onto the wall, which throws him just inside the mission trigger boundary. This method of van exit saves a nice 2.5 seconds over having to get out and walk a few steps, and the small amount of damage Franklin takes doesn't matter, as he'll fully healed up by the time we do any shootouts with him again, like 40 to 50 minutes farther into the speedrun. The next strat is on the next mission, Father-Son, and also regards entering the mission. Normally, after save warping back to Michael's house, we bring up the phone to clear a notification about sleep mode, and then run into the mission marker. The new strat is not as wild as jumping out of a moving van. Instead, the speedrunner simply runs around the edge of the mission trigger and directly into the house. This skips the cutscene of Michael entering the house. The cutscene is about 6 seconds long, but it takes about 2 seconds to run around the side of the door. So the net save is 4 seconds, a nice use of Rockstar's attention to detail for simple time save. Later on in Father-Son, the player has to drive Amanda's red Sentinel into the garage for repairs. Based on just what I'm showing of the old speedrun, you may be able to guess the goal of the new strat, another entry to something with a cutscene, and skipping cutscenes is the hot thing right now. While entering the garage, you can scroll the weapon selection to skip the cutscene from starting. The speedrunner also bonks the car on the right to bring it to a stop quicker, instantly putting them to the upgrade selection menu. This saves 6 seconds between the cutscene skip and quicker stop. This is a strat of the people, as you can do it too even in GTA Online for your free mode shenanigans. Just make sure to start scrolling only after the garage doors open high enough to get in. After that car repair, you drive as Franklin back to Michael's house. For a long time, we just drove straight out of the side road the repair shop is on until these 2 tighter turns, which get us onto the road that you can stay on all the way until Michael's house. We eventually found that you can instead bend left earlier on, and then take a single less tight turn onto the road that Michael's house is on. If this route seems like it's longer to you, you'd be right. Looking at the map, the old route in red takes that straight, then 2 turns. The blue new route instead only has a single, less tight turn. So while it does end up being a longer distance to travel, you maintain a higher speed throughout. Going back to the 2 tight turns, it's a difficult section of driving, as the traffic is rather unpredictable in this area, and the sidewalks are littered with pedestrians. This route at its core only saves 1 second, but it's safer and a good driver can utilize the brake boosting opportunities to make that time save more like 2 to 3 seconds when executed well. You can see here the new route is entering this intersection after the old route, but has more speed, and brake boosting kind of stacks, so getting a good boost and carrying the speed can multiply by the end of the drive when you don't have to slow down for the 2 tight turns as before. The mission marriage counseling contains one of the smallest optimizations the game has seen, and I love it. During this heavily scripted sequence where you pull down the house on the hill, you gain control of Michael for just a moment before you need to get him back in the truck. The speedrunner now spams the button to take cover before spamming the button to enter vehicles. This causes Michael to take 1 or 2 quicker steps towards the truck before beginning the vehicle entry animation. This saves about 1/3 of a second, a super tiny but nice little optimization, the kind of thing that's found as the game gets more and more scrutinized. To begin the mission friend request, we normally show up on a motorcycle and get off at Lester's door. That's way too simple. After the van dive out back in Complications was found, a similar method started being used here. Since we don't need to be standing or anything to start the mission, we just need to be off or out of the current vehicle, and as soon as the animation for jumping off the motorcycle ends, even though we are in a ragdoll state, that counts as an okay way to start the mission. This jump saves a nice 2 seconds over getting off the motorcycle like a sane person would, and the position of the motorcycle is reset after the mission's cutscenes play, so it doesn't matter that it's left on the ground by the door. The ending to friend request, after giving Jay Norris his mind-blowing call, the speedrun needs to run outside, far enough away from Michael's front door in order to let the next mission spawn. On the new speedrun side, they use the right door, which has a slightly shorter path, allowing the player to begin running sooner, which saves about half a second in movement time. Nearing the end of the mission casing the jewel store, normally after jumping onto the freeway to head back to Lester's warehouse, the speedrunner would stay on the highway until this opening in the barrier, and then jump down onto the road below that Lester's warehouse is located on. The improved option here is to now duck into the tunnel that goes through downtown Los Santos. It's relatively straight still to get off so you maintain speed, and traffic is pretty consistently easy to avoid in this area. You then cross over the rail yard, through the river, and then up the other side to come up behind the warehouse where the mission ends. The old route was not bad at all, utilizing 2 jumps to stay on the freeway for quite a long while. This new route, however, is more direct and stays straight enough that even with the extra jumps it requires, you maintain your speed. The new route is a bit tougher though, notably the bushes as you enter and exit the river area try to grab the car and spin it, so the player has to be ready to correct for that inconsistent movement. If that and the rest of the drive are done well, that can save 2.5 seconds over the old route. There is one thing that can mess it all up though, the train. The train can rarely randomly spawn between the river and Lester's warehouse, and the best option for the speedrun is to just wait it out, unless they notice it early enough to attempt this riskiest jump over the rails. It's about the same speed as the normal drive over the rails, but you can imagine how many explosions can happen if it's messed up. Side by side right away, in the mission Carbine Rifles, we are trying to get this truck full of guns needed for the heist, and of course, being a speedrun, then escape the cops as quick as possible. These 2 runs look extremely similar throughout this shootout and initial drive away. However, based on these actions alone, the right side speedrun will lose the cops and therefore finish the mission 2.5 seconds faster. In order to explain why, we'll have to take a technical look at a couple small actions the speedrun has to do in this section. The location the speedrun is choosing to do this shootout is determined by being as close as possible to the spawn point of this truck, which would normally drive in a big loop around the city. The old speedrun will shoot 3 of the occupants of the vehicle, but importantly not shooting the driver, as that would cause the vehicle to careen out of control. Instead, it will come to a stop right next to Micheal. The driver is then shot in the chest only after they get out of the vehicle to avoid having to watch the animation of Micheal pulling them out of the seat. They are shot in the chest because it delays the cop response trigger of this mission until after all of the occupants are dead, or until you drive far enough away from the original location. The speedrun would then continue on to go hide from the cops, as you can see by the stars blinking in the top right, meaning they are in cooldown mode. The new strat is largely the same, except it was realized you could shoot the 4th cop just after getting into the vehicle. With them being deceased, you instantly enter the cooldown mode, as it works out that there are no cops nearby. Basically, the speedrun didn't need to delay the cop response as long as was expected, so shooting the 4th member lets all the previous mentioned strats happen, while still delaying for just a bit less time than it was thought was needed. So looking at both again, you can see the new speedrun starts cooldown mode just a bit quicker than the old strat, while still managing to escape the cops and acquire the vehicle in the same manner. In the jewel store heist itself, there was a plague of this weird bug happening. As this cutscene begins, Franklin's motorcycle would fall through the ground like it has no collision, then seemingly reappear to drive to the back of the truck. Then the game would just sit for a while before his bike appears above the truck for a moment, then the cutscene ends. This wasn't just a funny happening though, as compared to a non-bugged instance, the weird cutscene would take an extra 7 seconds to complete. My guess is that's about how long it takes for Franklin's bike to fall below the world before hitting the bottom of the void and being reset to its proper location. This bug seemed to be happening more and more often, and was quite frustrating to have to wait for. Luckily, the reason it happens and a way to avoid it was found after a few months. During the earlier part of the jewel store heist, the speedrun uses an exact route through the store to acquire the minimum, and therefore fastest, amount of money needed before exiting the store. As the non-bug side reaches the exit, it will wait for just a moment and then leave. This pause allows the animation of Franklin's motorcycle exiting the truck to properly complete before the cutscene begins. Turns out, if it doesn't complete now, it causes the bug at the end of the mission in the river. Visually, you can see it settle when it turns from a scripted movement back into a normal motorcycle. The reason this was happening more often is that speedrunners are getting better at their movement through the jewel cases. A curse of being too fast, This strat technically has a time save of -1 second, as the speedrunner has to delay themselves to not do this section too quickly, but it's worth losing 1 second here instead of 7 seconds later in the mission. Fame or Shame's notable mission highlight is chasing Laszlo's red Prius-like dilettante through the city, but before that, we need to get into the truck. The speedrunner would normally run out as fast as they can and into the passenger door, leaving it open for Micheal, as waiting for Micheal to arrive was the main bottleneck on being able to start driving away. Turns out you can push Micheal in first person, as we've seen elsewhere in the speedrun. The speedrunner pushes Micheal with Trevor up until the front steps. At this point, they have to break away to still reach the truck, open the passenger door, punch out the previous driver, and turn it on all by the time Micheal arrives. This saved 2 seconds over waiting for Micheal to come to the truck. However, after the first draft of this video rendered and I sent it to a Discord with a lot of top GTA 5 speedrunners to review, Alex pointed out that actually pushing Micheal all the way down the stairs is another third of a second quicker, as Michael's animation for going down the steps as an NPC is incredibly slow. Not many people were taking advantage of this update to the strat, so I wasn't aware of it either. So even though Micheal reaches the truck around the same time as Trevor, overall, the new pushing strat saves 2 1/3 second over just running to the truck right away. Pushing in first person was not a brand new idea. It was used as the only instance of NPC pushing for a long time in scouting the port, as Floyd is a very slow walker here, so it was a clear benefit to speed him up. As pushing NPCs became more popular in other parts of the run, this strat itself leveled up to using a truck to push Floyd. After getting out of Trevor's vehicle, there was a couple second window where the speedrunner can't run, but can still do actions like take cover to move a bit faster and enter vehicles. The game only cares that you aren't in Trevor's truck and doesn't do any checks for other vehicles, so it's possible to get into this truck and use it to push Floyd around. You have to be careful to not really hit any other NPCs or break Floyd by getting him stuck, as he's going to be completely off his scripted path, and if you stop being able to push him quickly, he will be off his path for too long, causing a mission fail, which results in about 1.5 minutes or more of time loss, as you cannot retry this strat from the mission checkpoint. It only works on first arrival to the dock area. This part is probably the hardest, as Floyd starts walking towards where he wants to be, and you have to use the front of the truck as a wedge in a way it was never designed for. Done successfully though, it will cause Floyd to suddenly go, "Oh, hey, we're at the crane," and let you continue on with the mission. This strat saves a massive 50 seconds compared to the slow walk, but you really have to earn those 50 seconds. It's a tough strat on its own due to driving the cumbersome vehicle and dealing with Floyd's movement, as well as the fact that it's hard to practice as you have to reload the whole mission in order to do another attempt, but it's one of my favorites to see done well. A more abstract strat that's hard to quantify would be Brakeboosting, as how much time it saves since introduction into the speedrun varies constantly. Just the drive in this van section towards the jewel store job saves 12 seconds with the use of Brakeboosting, though at first, Brakeboosting would only save like 6 seconds on a drive like this before speedrunners got better at utilizing it. Maybe one day I'll do a comparison of the entire nearly 6-hour speedrun to see what Brakeboosting has changed, but that's a big job to consider, as it's probably at least 10 minutes or more over that whole time. If you want to know more about Brakeboosting, there's a video in the description where I go much more in depth, or check out Casual Speedrun and the other strat update videos for further terms and techniques explained. Many of the strats talked about in this video aren't the newest added to the speedrun. I've got a backlog to catch up on over time, but next week's video is going to cover the newest and biggest strat in the game, on Mission 0, where runners use a single mission 9 times to skip over other missions almost entirely. An entire video for just one strat, but the strat itself saves like 15 minutes in the run, as well as ledge buffer explanations and more coming up soon.